China's building a naval base in Cambodia, and they're hiding it from the world. But this is just the beginning. Welcome to China Uncensored, I'm Chris Chappell. Stunning news, everyone. China is building a secret naval base in Cambodia. That's according to anonymous Western officials. They also say that both China and Cambodia are taking extraordinary measures to conceal the operation. I'm shocked that the Chinese Communist Party would build a secret military base and then lie about it. Now, if the Chinese Communist Party's military, the People's Liberation Army, was really building a Navy base in Cambodia, that would be a big deal. Except China's secret military base in Cambodia is a not-so-secret military base. We did an episode about this back in 2019. Now, if the Chinese Communist Party's military, the People's Liberation Army, was really building a Navy base in Cambodia, that would be a big deal. Deja vu. Back in 2019, U.S. officials said that China and Cambodia had secretly signed a deal to allow the PLA to use part of a Cambodian Navy base. That's the Ream Naval Base, which is here in the Gulf of Thailand. It's a pretty significant location. I'll tell you why later in this episode. But the deal was for the Chinese military to get the exclusive use of the north side of the naval base. Now, back in 2019, both Cambodia and China denied that there was a secret deal. And Cambodia's Prime Minister Hun Sen called it fake news. And he has a lot of experience in fake news. After all, Hun Sen is a former member of the Khmer Rouge who has ruled Cambodia for 37 years. I'm sure it's because the Cambodian people just love him. The Chinese regime has been supporting Hun Sen for years. Cambodia is part of China's Belt and Road Initiative, and Chinese companies have pumped billions of dollars into the country. Of course, some of that money might not have made it to the Cambodian people. Hun and his family have been accused of a lot of corruption. But I'm sure there's a totally innocent explanation for all of Hun Sen's million-dollar watches. I'm shocked that the Chinese Communist Party would support a corrupt authoritarian leader. But all along, as China and Cambodia got more buddy-buddy, both sides continued to deny that China was getting any part of the Ream naval base, despite analysts documenting signs of dredging using satellite imagery, as well as a lot of fast new construction since that totally non-existent secret deal was signed. But that's not the only suspicious thing that's happening at Ream. I'll tell you more after the break. Welcome back. For years, we've seen the evidence that the Chinese Communist Party is building something at Cambodia's Ream naval base. But that's not all. The Cambodian government also demolished 2 different facilities at the same base that had been built by the U.S. They did that after declining a U.S. offer to pay to renovate one of them. And it was around that time that they began refusing to let U.S. officials visit the base. I'm sure they had nothing to hide at all. Total openness and transparency. It had nothing at all to do with masking the presence of the Chinese military at the base, like, for example, making Chinese soldiers wear uniforms that looked like Cambodian uniforms, or no uniforms at all. I'm sure there's an innocent explanation for this. Like, obviously the Chinese military had some kind of sudden uniform emergency and had to borrow some uniforms from the Cambodians. Their uniforms were probably in the wash. But it's not just the U.S. that Cambodia is trying to hide from. Last year, they also relocated a Vietnamese building that was on the naval base. Let's just say China and Vietnam aren't on the best terms right now. This whole thing is kind of hilarious, in a horrible way. I mean, Cambodia and China are literally sneaking around, but everyone knows about their illicit military relationship anyway. But after years of hiding, it's finally time to make it official. This week, there's going to be a groundbreaking ceremony at Ream, and Chinese officials are going to be there. That's not just according to anonymous Western officials. Somehow, the Washington Post got a Chinese official to confirm this as well. The Chinese official also confirmed to the Washington Post that part of the base will be used by the Chinese military. I'm wondering whether that official is still employed right now or is being interrogated by the MSS. But the official did claim that it's not exclusively going to be used by the Chinese military. It's also going to be used by Chinese scientists. You know, that doesn't make it less suspicious. Given what we know about China's civil-military fusion projects, that actually makes it more suspicious, because those scientists are clearly there to give cover to the actual military operations going on. But why are China and Cambodia being so cagey about the Chinese military using Cambodia's naval base? I'll tell you after the break. Welcome back. So China and Cambodia are about to have a groundbreaking ceremony at Ream Naval Base. This base is in a really strategic location, and the Chinese Communist Party knows a lot of countries aren't going to be very happy about this. Like I said earlier, Ream is on the Gulf of Thailand, pretty close to Vietnam and just outside the South China Sea. Ream also means easy access to the Strait of Malacca. That's the most important shipping lane between the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. And it's a choke point that could be used to cut off the Indian Ocean from the South China Sea. You know what's at the mouth of the Strait of Malacca? Singapore. Singapore is another authoritarian state that's pretty friendly with China overall. But Singapore has gotten a little nervous about China's nationalist expansionism in the past few years, like when Singapore unexpectedly sanctioned Russia for invading Ukraine. One of the reasons it did that was to stand up for small states, like itself, and keep them from being used as sacrificial pawns. Now, Singapore said nothing about China here, but let's just say it's not Russia they're worried about. And once China establishes itself at Ream, I wouldn't be surprised to see them try to get some kind of military base in Myanmar. That would allow the PLA Navy to keep expanding westward, while their military bases in the South China Sea would allow their Navy to keep going east into the Pacific. You know, the military bases that Xi Jinping promised not to build in the South China Sea and then did anyway? So China's use of Cambodia's Ream naval base is pretty alarming by itself, but it's also a giant red warning sign about China's expansion in the South Pacific. Remember, that security deal that China signed with the Solomon Islands means they'll be able to build some kind of dual-use facility in the Solomons, like maybe a place where Chinese scientists can work. Also the PLA Navy. But of course, the Chinese regime swears it would never build a naval base in the Solomons. Totally fake news. I've heard that one before. And now it's time for me to answer a question from a fan of the show who supports China Uncensored on Patreon or Locals. Expat in Phils asks on Locals, "Hi Chris and company. I'm in the Philippines and the dynamic here is always changing, especially now that there is a new president incoming. What are your thoughts about China's takeover of South Pacific Islands and how do you see it impacting the Philippines?" Well, expat, my thoughts are that the Chinese regime's takeover of the South Pacific Islands is a huge danger to the security of the region, and that includes the Philippines. We could see a situation where the Philippines is pretty surrounded by Chinese influence, from Papua New Guinea up through the artificial islands in the South China Sea. And the Philippines isn't too far away from Taiwan either. If the Chinese Communist Party decides to go for Taiwan, that could destabilize the whole region. Not exactly a reassuring message, which is why we need to deter the CCP while we still can. Thanks for your question, Expat and Phils. Thank you for supporting China Uncensored as we make episodes like this. Visit our exclusive social media community at chinauncensored.locals.com. Join us and you'll have a chance to get your question answered on the show. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching China Uncensored.